Hello everyone! A little while ago I reviewed 1972's The Poseidon Adventure. Today we're going to take a look at its follow-up of sorts, 1974's The Towering Inferno. A new skyscraper has been erected in San Francisco, its 138 stories making it the tallest building in the world. But the night of its inaugural gala, an undetected fire in a utility room spreads out of control, trapping 300 people in the promenade room on top. This film, produced by Irwin Allen, directed by John Gillerman, and written by Sterling Sillivant, had a huge cast featuring Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, Faye Dunaway, William Holden, Richard Chamberlain, Jennifer Jones, Fred Astaire, Susan Blakely, Robert Vaughn, Robert Wagner, and O.J. Simpson. This was Master of Disaster Irwin Allen's second venture into this genre. In my video about the Poseidon Adventure, I gave an overview of the 70s disaster movie phenomena and his significant contribution to it. I discussed how he started with a bang and helped make the big-budget disaster movie with an all-star cast a major trend, and then how that trend declined toward the end of the decade as budgets swelled but box office returns shrank, indicating that audiences had grown weary of the concept and were moving on. But before that happened, this movie came out in December 1974, right in the middle of the decade, so to speak, and it would turn out to be not just the commercial peak of the 1970s disaster movie era, but a major financial success of the genre overall, both domestically and internationally. If I were to hazard a guess as to why this film did so well, I would say it's partly due to the success of its predecessor, for it promised the same kind of excitement and effects, but also due to its star power. This film features Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, or Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. Newman plays the architect and McQueen plays the fire chief. I'm sure many of you are aware of the passive-aggressive rivalry between these two men who happen to have shared similar screen images, blue-eyed rebels who drove race cars and oozed coolness. Newman was 5 years older than McQueen, but still a powerful box office draw, while 1974 saw McQueen become the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. That the two of them were competing for the spotlight, eyeing each other's salaries and comparing their screen time isn't that much of a surprise. To settle the argument of who should get top billing, alignment on the posters and credits was messed around with. McQueen's name is first left to right, but Newman's name, by being bumped up a bit, appears first top to bottom. This was the first time this kind of billing shenanigans, called diagonal or staggered billing, was used, though it was actually conceived of back a few years earlier when Newman was originally set to star opposite McQueen in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It looks a bit silly to me, and really something I've always felt made the movie so fun and so iconic was that here you have these two major stars appearing and working together. I would think for movie fans in the 70s, that in and of itself would be a huge draw. Never mind who gets more screen time, who gets more lines, who gets the last line. And if you're more a fan of one than the other, then you should be satisfied either way. Newman's architect dominates the first half, and maybe gets more screen time than McQueen's fire chief, but McQueen purposely doesn't enter the movie until 43 minutes in, at which point he shows up to take charge of the situation and become a prominent feature in the film's second half. But Newman doesn't completely disappear either. They both get ample opportunity to play the hero, and fortunately, it doesn't sound like they hated each other. They got along well on the set. By the way, McQueen was first offered Newman's role opposite Ernest Borgnine, but he said he'd take the fire chief role if they found someone of equal caliber to play the architect. Enter Newman. And something else you might not know is that McQueen made his feature film debut in an uncredited role in 1956's Somebody Up There Likes Me, a boxing biopic that starred Paul Newman. Who you think the true star is seems to be a subjective question, and perhaps it hinges on which actor you have a stronger preference for. My mom has always had a thing for Steve McQueen, and I was very familiar with a couple of his movies growing up, this one as well as The Blob and The Great Escape, so for me, this was his movie. An equally interesting and well-known story, I apologize if this is all stuff you've heard before, is how this movie came to be. The Towering Inferno is based on two books, 1973's The Tower by Richard Martin Stern and 1974's The Glass Inferno by Thomas N. Scorscia and Frank M. Robinson. In '73, Warner Brothers outbid 20th Century Fox and Columbia and bought the rights to The Tower. Shortly after, and I mean very shortly, 20th Century Fox, who had made The Poseidon Adventure, bought the rights to The Glass Inferno. When it became apparent that both of these very similar movies would probably undermine each other at the box office and end up both being failures, Irwin Allen suggested the studios team up and make one film from both books, dividing the cost and the profit. This was an unprecedented move, but it turned out to be an ingenious decision, for the resulting film ended up being the highest-grossing movie of 1974 and one of the biggest winners of 1975 as well. Screenwriter Sterling Siliphant, who had successfully adapted Paul Gallico's novel for The Poseidon Adventure, was given the unenviable task of pooling the two novels, taking certain elements of plot and characters from each one and weaving them together into one cohesive whole. I haven't read either book, but I have read reviews of them on the internet. The main theme both books have in common, besides a skyscraper catching fire, is that the skyscrapers were made with minimal compliance to building codes and that corners were cut to save costs, the main cause of the problem in the movie. The tower is set on opening day for a 125-story building in Manhattan. It features blocked stairs, elevators not working, the rigging of a breeches buoy, and guests getting trapped in the tower room. The major difference is that the fire is caused when a disgruntled worker sets off a stolen bomb. The Glass Inferno is set in a 66-story building in an unnamed city. It catches fire, and the story focuses on various characters trying to escape, plus the fire chief who's trying to anticipate what will happen next. It includes guests trapped in a promenade room and has the same resolution as the film. So you can see how Sterling Siliphant kind of picked and chose what he wanted to use. John Guillermin was brought in to direct, a British filmmaker known for his temperamental perfectionism and his success making big films and action flicks like 2 Tarzan movies, 2 King Kong movies, The Bridget Remagen, and Death on the Nile. 2 years before this, he directed Skyjacked, another disaster movie set on a plane. The Towering Inferno was his biggest directorial project, and afterward he expressed dissatisfaction that Irwin Allen got most of the credit for making the movie when he was the one in the director's chair. I should clarify, I'm not trying to dispute what he says, but it does sound like Irwin Allen was the one making the action scenes while Guillermin was in charge of everything else. You know, if you read up on the behind-the-scenes info for this movie, you'll find out that it wasn't the happiest production experience for some of the key players. Faye Dunaway was very difficult. William Holden was angry that he didn't get the top billing that he had demanded. Jennifer Jones didn't enjoy working on it. Paul Newman expressed regret afterward that he'd taken the role. But I don't want to dwell too much on stories like this. I don't like the bitter drama or egotism that goes into making movies. I find the less I know about personal kerfuffles involved in the process, the freer I am to just enjoy the movie. And I do enjoy this one. I always have, ever since I was a little kid and it would come on TV, and of course my mom would have to stop and watch it. Oddly enough, though, I don't think I ever saw it from the beginning until 2013, when we cracked open this 2-disc special edition DVD, which comes with a little booklet full of behind-the-scenes information and lots of pictures and all kinds of fun little tidbits like that. And also, lobby cards! I love lobby cards. They're so much fun. I don't know what you would do with them, but they're fun to look at. Nice, high-quality pictures of things that happen in the movie, and some spoilers, oh my goodness. Because it's one of those movies I saw a lot of in my childhood, I've always had a soft spot for it, and for a long time I claimed to prefer it over the Poseidon Adventure, though I think that's just because up to a certain age, it's the one I was more familiar with. Not that one needs to be compared to the other. I know I'm doing a lot of comparing in this review, but that's because I just talked about the Poseidon Adventure not that long ago. But there are so many commonalities. Same producer, same writer, same score composer, etc. And again, a group of people in impractical evening clothes trapped in an unreachable area fighting for their lives against a natural element. So many commonalities that comparison is inevitable. There are even a couple things that struck me as possible references to the previous film. The opening shot is actually of water. A woman in peril wears a man's pink dress shirt. A slow dance instrumental version of The Morning After plays during the opening gala. I'd never noticed that before. Since I did just delve into the Poseidon Adventure and it's still fresh on my mind, I had a heightened awareness of things that tied the two movies together, and it struck me that the Poseidon Adventure would have been even more like the Towering Inferno if it had focused not just on the group of 10 trying to make it up to the bottom of the ship, but on another group or two of survivors and on the rescue effort. The Towering Inferno has people trapped in the promenade room on the 135th floor, but there are also people stuck on the 81st floor and other floors, and characters are moving up and down the building and navigating obstacles. And there's also the fire department and the pop-up sickbay outside. It's not just about survival of a core group, it's survival and rescue and how people are responding to the crisis on every level. The scope is broadened, and thus the movie is significantly longer. The Poseidon Adventure, at least as I came to view it recently, is more character-driven and more relationship-driven. It's more isolated, and it's both a literal and metaphorical journey. The Towering Inferno is more complicated, with many floors and fires and character clusters to keep track of. As much friction as there was among the 10 in the Poseidon Adventure, I'd say that there's more interpersonal conflict here. Some characters clash with each other, others are concealing something. The architect is eager to get out of the city, but the builder is trying to secure him for more contracts. The builder is trying to get something from the senator, and you're not sure if the senator's really on board for it. The architect's lover is torn between settling down with him and taking the coveted position she's just been offered that would advance her career. The builder's family is falling apart as his daughter and son-in-law have marital troubles. Fred Astaire is up to something as he courts Jennifer Jones, and Robert Wagner is having a secret affair with his secretary, Susan Flannery. There's more scumminess, too, especially if we're talking about Richard Chamberlain's character, who is a mega heel. The environment is also more corporate, and there are shades of covert and corrupt dealings. Much of the setup takes place in grandiose office suites where people argue about cutting corners and taking kickbacks, and the builder refuses to shut everything down when the architect rushes in to announce that we almost had a fire and the structure's not safe. The script is full of fateful moments and bad decisions like that. The day begins with a fire, which is caught and put out, but it's just a sneak preview of what's to come. The mayor has trouble cutting the ribbon at the opening ceremony. I think that might have just been a happy accident while the cameras were rolling, but boy does it seem symbolic. Disaster movies sometimes rely on people making the wrong choice or acting stupid and rash out of fear and panic. There's a good deal of that here. People rush to use the express elevator right after the announcement not to. People run toward a chopper when they are told to wait. The film's a good illustration of what tends to happen in a crisis. Some people rise to the occasion, helping the weak and working as a team, and others reveal how selfish they truly are. Unfortunately, when a situation turns into every man for himself, the chances increase that no one will make it out alive. But here we are, however many minutes into the video, and I haven't even talked about the main thing that people associate with this movie, the thing that gets praised the most, the special effects. The glass tower is not a real building in San Francisco, but the movie does a surprisingly good job convincing you it is. The effects crew built a 70-foot model for long shots, that's pretty big for a miniature, along with a model of the nearby Peerless building. The glass tower was added to the skyline using matte inserts, while for closer shots, another miniature of the top 40 stories was used. I was especially impressed by this shot, one of several pulled off with blue screen composites, and as with the Poseidon Adventure, huge sets were built for the interior sequences, the promenade room being the largest, with a large cyclorama wrapped around the windows to provide a bird's eye view of the city. And then of course there's the fire, which the film so excellently illustrates is an unpredictable and deadly force. A lot of the visuals for the building were achieved through what you could call optical illusions, but all that fire and the explosions, those aren't illusions. Some of the film's most fiery sequences are the most memorable ones, like the famous scene in which the partygoers are startled by a man on fire stumbling out of the elevator. Or, in a similar vein, there's the lovers' tryst sequence. The phones have been shut off so they won't be disturbed, and great pains have been taken to make sure no one knows what they're up to, so no one has any idea that they're trapped in the office with a fire raging outside. This is one of the most terrifying sequences, I think. The character rushing through the flames with a damp towel over his head, a pitifully small means of protection, struggling to make it to the door as the flames begin to overwhelm him. I'm not a huge advocate for the use of slow motion, but I find it very effective in this moment and in the sequence that immediately follows, where his secretary is suffocating and desperate to escape both the flames and the smoke. Another scene that's always made an impression on me is the one where Paul Newman, Jennifer Jones, and the deaf woman's children maneuver the mangled stairwell. Watching them hold their breath and shimmy down that wobbly railing, for some reason, brings me back to those awful days in gym class when we had to do rope climbing, and I was really bad at it, and I could hardly bear to get 3 feet off the ground. Paul Newman did a lot of his own stunts in that scene. Not to be outdone, Steve McQueen also did a lot of his own stunt work. That includes the jump from a helicopter onto a burning roof, which he insisted on doing himself. McQueen really delved into his part, doing ride-alongs with firemen, and at one point, when a fire accidentally broke out on set, McQueen jumped in to help a real fireman, who wasn't aware who he was, extinguish it. My mom wondered if, at this point in his life, McQueen was beginning to feel unwell, or if his decline was even exacerbated by the strenuous conditions of shooting this movie. But reportedly, it wasn't until 1978 that he developed the lingering cough that would turn out to be mesothelioma. McQueen's best moment in the film occurs when he's back on the ground, just been taking a breather, and Dabney Coleman informs him they've got one last crazy plan to try to save the people on top, and he's the only one who can pull it off. The acting from both is great in the scene as McQueen realizes just what's being required of him, and then he drops an expletive, and the timing and delivery is just perfect. This is a family-friendly channel, so I'm not going to play a clip of it, and I'm certainly not going to say it myself. But when McQueen drops the expletive, it encapsulates everything he's thinking so effectively. This scene is followed by the climactic sequence, which features what I bet some moviegoers had been waiting the whole movie for, McQueen and Newman working together. McQueen helps Newman, then Newman helps McQueen. The music is especially good in these intense scenes. John Williams wrote it, and while I feel the Poseidon Adventure is the superior score and one of his best film compositions, this is good music too. In the Poseidon Adventure, the main theme has a dramatic resurgence, swelling in the background as the remaining characters enter the climactic part of the film. Williams does a similar thing here, letting the music loose in the lead up to the climax, and as there's the added element of a countdown, the ticking clock is synced with the musical beat, an especially powerful choice. The movie's a thriller, an action-adventure, but it's also dealing with some legitimately scary stuff. Fear of fire, fear of heights, and I came to the sobering realization that I can't watch it now without thinking about 9/11. There's certain imagery, and the scenario as a whole, that calls that tragedy to mind. that doesn't mean I can't enjoy the movie like I used to. I can. On the contrary, certain situations, and especially a couple harrowing death scenes, have even more gravitas because I'm aware of how real and how terrifying the situation can be. Incidentally, the Towering Inferno came out a year after the building of the World Trade Center in New York City was completed. One of the novels was set in Manhattan and uses the North Tower as a major plot point. And the film, which employed roughly 1,000 firemen, is dedicated to the firefighters who daily risk their lives rushing into burning buildings to rescue people. The film was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Score, Best Sound, Best Art Direction and Set Decoration, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Picture, and won 3 for Best Original Song, Best Film Editing, and Best Cinematography. The original song was We May Never Love Like This Again, written by Al Kasha and Joel Hirschhorn, the same team that penned The Morning After for The Poseidon Adventure. To sing the song in the movie, Maureen McGovern, who'd scored a big hit in '73 with the pop version of The Morning After, makes an uncredited cameo appearance as the lounge singer. This song wasn't quite the hit the other one was. It only made it to number 83 on the Billboard Hot 100. I don't think I've ever heard it play on any of the oldies radio stations that I've listened to in my life. A few words about other cast members. Jennifer Jones came out of semi-retirement to play the part of Lisolette. Her performance, her last appearance on film, earned her a Golden Globe nomination. Fred Astaire earned the Best Supporting Actor nomination for his performance, such a departure from the song and dance roles that typified his long career. He doesn't do any singing here, but he does dance a little, very briefly and very charmingly, with Jennifer Jones. The supporting cast includes a number of alumni from The Poseidon Adventure, most notably actor-turned-stuntman Ernie F. Orsatti, famous for that backwards fall into the skylight, here playing a fireman. He gets to do another big stunt here, clinging to Steve McQueen's hands for dear life as he dangles on the side of the scenic elevator. A few other people of note are Sheila Matthews, who became Mrs. Irwin Allen that year as the mayor's wife. She played the nurse in The Poseidon Adventure. Don Gordon, friend and frequent co-star of Steve McQueen's, playing Cappy, a fire captain. And Scott Newman, son of Paul, who plays a young firefighter who confesses a fear of heights to McQueen before having to rappel down an elevator shaft. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Gregory Sierra, who played Carlos, the always cheerful, always helpful bartender who is the friendliest and most easily likable character in the film. My final assessment is favorable, of course. I have come to feel that The Poseidon Adventure is the better film. I think it has stronger individual development, it's more focused, it has more likable characters despite their faults, it elicits more emotion, at least from me, it has more striking set designs, and has a better score. But The Towering Inferno has amazing effects, iconic images, 2 great leading men giving it their all, a tremendous sense of escalating tension as the fire begins early on and goes unnoticed as it builds and builds and builds. There's more peril and more thrills, and frankly, it's a more realistic scenario. Buildings of all heights catch fire, and people get trapped, and firefighters have to struggle to reach them in time and douse the flames. These are things that happen, and happen every day. I know The Towering Inferno has its detractors. It did then, it does now. Even some of the cast and crew went on record with some disparaging remarks. Criticism is to be expected, though I am surprised at how much some people seem to hate it. I wouldn't say it's a perfect film. There are a few things that make me scratch my head, like why do the phones continue to work, and how on earth is McQueen able to make it all around the building so quickly? But I don't obsess over these things. I just enjoy the movie, and I find that very easy to do because it's great entertainment. If you've seen The Towering Inferno, and I know several of you have because several of you mentioned it when I reviewed The Poseidon Adventure, I would love to know what you think of it, so please feel free to share your thoughts on it in the comments below. I look forward to reading them, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!